Hey there, ready to dive into something a little unexpected?
Oh, I'm intrigued already.
Today we're going to be tackling how to really shine at work, but not in that like flashy look at me way,
Right, right.
More like bringing your best self, uh, guided by a really solid sense of purpose and ethics.
I like it.
And get this, our source material is actually a podcast episode called Shining Bright in the Workplace.
Okay, so you might be thinking, wait, a faith-based podcast for career advice.
Yeah, I was a little surprised too.
But trust me, this episode has some seriously relevant nuggets for anyone who wants to navigate the workplace, with integrity, strong ethics, and a real sense of purpose.
Okay, I'm hooked. What was the first thing that jumped out at you from the episode?
Well, the way they started things off with the story of Daniel from the Bible really got my attention.
Oh, yeah, I remember that story.
He's taken captive to Babylon,
Yeah.
so talk about a hostile work environment, right?
Yeah, definitely not the ideal company culture.
Totally, a place with completely different customs and values.
So how do you handle that?
Well, he basically refused to compromise his beliefs.
Oh, wow. Even when it meant, going against the grain in a major way.
Exactly, and it kind of makes you think, right?
It does.
Makes that awkward office potluck seem a little less intimidating.
Right. Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, but here's the thing. Daniel's commitment to his values, even though it made him stand out,
Yeah.
it actually ended up working in his favor.
Really?
Yeah, he gained the king's trust
Yeah.
and rose to a position of influence.
So sticking to your guns can actually pay off.
Sometimes. Yeah, it's interesting. It makes you wonder, have there been times in your own career where you felt that pressure to compromise your values?
That is a good question.
Even in small ways, And if so, how did you handle it?
Yeah, something to think about for sure. And the podcast really leans into this whole idea of ethics, right? Suggesting that having a higher standard can actually be a competitive advantage.
It's true. They unpack this whole idea of working as unto the Lord rather than just for your human boss.
Oh, I remember that.
It's a quote from Colossians 3:23.
Mm-hmm.
And what I took away from that is it's about bringing a higher level of intention and purpose to our work,
Yeah,
even if we're not religious.
I like that.
It's about asking ourselves, if I were accountable to something bigger than just my boss or a paycheck,
Yeah.
how would that change my approach?
I love that. So it's not just about hitting deadlines and checking boxes, but about the why behind our actions.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's about aligning our work with our deepest values,
I see.
striving for excellence in every task, being honest and reliable, even when others aren't watching.
Right.
Think about it. How would that kind of mindset impact not only your own work, but the overall culture of your workplace?
Yeah, that's powerful. The podcast also dives into another powerful story from the Bible, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Oh, yeah, those guys.
These guys refused to bow down to a golden statue, which was basically like refusing to conform to the company's questionable new policy.
Right, and the consequences were pretty intense.
Yeah.
Thrown into a fiery furnace.
Wow, talk about a fiery furnace moment. Makes
Yeah.
you think about those times when you've had to stand up for what you believe in, even when it felt risky.
Absolutely. Sometimes standing by your convictions leads to difficult situations.
Yeah, for sure.
But the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego highlights a crucial point.
Mm-hmm.
There's this bigger principle at play here
Okay.
about not compromising your integrity, even when it feels like everyone else is going along with something, isn't right.
It's interesting how the podcast brings up real-world examples, too.
Yeah.
Not just stories from the Bible. They talk about Patagonia and their commitment to sustainability.
Right. Patagonia is a great example of a company that walks the walk
Yeah,
when it comes to their values.
for sure.
Even if it means making tough choices that could impact their bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
they stick to their principles. It makes you think.
Yeah, what can we learn from their approach?
Maybe it's about being more transparent with our own values in the workplace, even when it feels risky. Because ultimately, that kind of authenticity builds trust and respect.
Totally, from colleagues and clients.
Absolutely. And speaking of trust, the podcast also digs into how easily negativity can spread in a workplace.
Oh, yeah.
The gossip, the complaining, the cynicism,
Yeah, it's like a dark cloud.
It really is.
It just hangs over everything.
It's contagious.
Yeah, and it's so draining.
It is.
To be around that kind of energy all the time.
Exactly. And the podcast makes this powerful analogy,
Okay.
comparing negativity to darkness and our positive actions to light.
Interesting.
They emphasize that even a small amount of light can dispel a lot of darkness.
I like that.
It's a reminder that we have the power to shift the atmosphere,
Yeah.
even in a seemingly negative environment.
Okay, so instead of getting sucked into the negativity, we can be the ones to bring a more positive energy.
Precisely. And it's not about being naive
Right.
or ignoring real problems.
Just not.
It's more about being intentional about the energy we bring,
Yeah.
offering a word of encouragement,
Yeah.
focusing on solutions instead of dwelling on the problems,
Okay.
choosing to see the good in people and situations.
Yeah.
These small acts can make a big difference.
The podcast also talked about the company we keep.
Yes.
And how that can influence our attitudes and behaviors.
At work and outside of work.
It's so true. They made a really interesting point about how the people we surround ourselves with can have a huge impact
It's true.
on our own mindset.
It's like that saying,
What's that?
you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. So it's not just about who we sit next to in the office,
Pretty
but
good.
also about who we choose to spend our time with outside of work.
Exactly. It's about being mindful of the energy we're exposed to,
Right.
making sure we're also seeking out those positive influences.
I see.
If we're constantly surrounded by people who are negative and cynical,
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot harder to maintain our own positive outlook.
I remember the podcast host shared a story about how they used to get caught up in those gossip sessions.
Ugh.
Whoa.
With coworkers.
I hate those.
But they realized it was actually draining their energy,
It is.
making them feel worse about themselves.
It's so easy to fall into that trap,
I know.
especially when it feels like everyone else is doing it.
It does.
And can even feel like a way to bond with colleagues.
Right.
But ultimately, it's not a sustainable way to build relationships.
Right.
Or to create a positive work environment.
What I found helpful was the podcast's suggestion to focus on building others up
Yes.
instead of tearing them down.
Right. Simple things like making an effort to compliment coworkers
Yeah.
on their work,
Mhm.
offering words of encouragement, or just genuinely listening to someone
Yeah.
when they're talking about their day.
Right.
These small gestures can have a big impact on creating a more positive and supportive culture.
It's about being the kind of colleague you'd want to have yourself.
Exactly. And, the podcast didn't shy away from the fact that embodying these values in the workplace,
Yeah.
it isn't always easy. Right. It's definitely not always rainbows and butterflies.
There are going to be
Yeah.
challenges and times when you feel like giving up.
For sure. I appreciated how they emphasized that we're not in this alone.
That's so important.
Hmm.
They talked about having a strong support system,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's through family, friends, or even a supportive mentor at work.
Yeah.
Having people we can turn to for advice,
Yeah.
encouragement,
Yeah.
a little pep talk when we need it
Right.
can make all the difference.
I also talked about self-care,
Yes.
how important it is to take care of our own well-being,
So important.
especially when we're trying to be a positive force in a challenging environment.
Right. They reminded us that we can't pour from an empty cup.
Yeah, you got to fill your own cup first.
Exactly. Like putting on your own oxygen mask first
Right.
before helping others.
I see.
If we're running on fumes,
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to show up as our best selves,
Right, for anyone.
including ourselves.
So it's about making sure we're taking time for ourselves,
Be-
doing things that recharge our batteries and help us stay grounded.
Whether that's taking a walk in nature,
Mm-hmm.
spending time with loved ones,
Yeah,
pursuing a hobby,
right.
or just getting enough sleep.
It's so important.
Whatever fills our cup and helps us feel more balanced and energized.
And speaking of energy, the podcast also touched on this idea of finding purpose in our work.
Something
Yeah.
a lot of people struggle with.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Especially if they haven't quite found their dream job yet.
It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day grind
Yeah.
and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Totally. But the podcast challenged us to think about how our contributions,
Yes.
no matter how small they may seem,
Mhm.
are making a difference in the world. They gave the example of a janitor who takes pride in keeping a hospital clean
Right.
and safe for patients and staff.
Or an administrative assistant who goes above and beyond to help their team stay organized and efficient.
It's about shifting our perspective from seeing our work as just a job to seeing it as an opportunity to make a positive impact.
Exactly. Even in small ways.
I remember they shared a story from a listener who wrote in about how they were struggling to find meaning in their job as a data entry clerk.
It sounds like they were feeling pretty burnt out.
Yeah, and like their work didn't really matter.
Right. But then they had this realization that the data they were entering
Yeah.
was actually being used to help people in a very real way.
Oh, wow.
It was being used to track disease outbreaks,
Mm-hmm.
develop new treatments,
Okay.
and even save lives.
Wow. talk about a perspective shift.
Right.
Suddenly, their job wasn't just about entering numbers into a spreadsheet.
Exactly.
It was about being a part of something much bigger than themselves.
It's amazing how a simple shift in perspective can have such a profound impact
It is.
on our motivation and our sense of purpose.
The podcast wrapped up this segment by encouraging listeners to think about their own why.
Right.
What is it that motivates you to do your best work? What impact do you want to have on the world through your work?
It's a powerful question to reflect on.
It is.
What is it that lights you up and makes you feel like you're making a difference?
Right.
Because when we tap into that deeper sense of purpose, it can transform our entire experience of work.
It's amazing how they manage to weave together practical advice with these deeper questions about purpose and values.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And one of the practical things they talked about that I found really valuable was the idea of mentorship.
Oh, yeah. Giving and receiving it. That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Finding someone who can offer guidance and support, as I navigate my career.
The podcast made a great point about seeking out mentors who embody the values you aspire to.
Right.
People who are already living the kind of work life you envision for yourself.
Yeah.
But they also emphasize that mentorship doesn't have to be this formal, structured thing.
So it could be as simple as reaching out to someone you admire and asking for a quick coffee chat or just, picking their brain about a specific challenge you're facing.
Exactly. It's about being proactive and seeking out those connections.
Right.
And on the flip side, if you're in a position to offer guidance and support to others, they encourage listeners to consider mentoring someone.
Yeah.
They highlighted how even small acts of mentorship can make a huge difference in someone's career trajectory.
It's like paying it forward, right?
I love that.
Sharing the knowledge and experience you've gained to help others shine brighter.
And they also talked about the importance of celebrating successes.
Oh, yeah.
Both our own and those of others.
I'm definitely guilty of not doing that enough.
Really?
I'm always so focused on the next goal, the next project, that I forget to pause and appreciate how far I've come.
It's something we all struggle with, I think.
Yeah.
But the podcast reminded us that taking time to celebrate those milestones, achievements, even those small wins, can create a more positive and motivating work environment.
I can see that.
It's about fostering a culture of appreciation and gratitude.
It makes sense. I can see how that would not only boost morale, but also encourage people to keep striving for excellence.
Yeah.
It's like building a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. And the podcast host even shared a story about how they used to struggle with feeling envious of other people's successes.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in that.
But they realized that this negativity was actually holding them back and preventing them from fully appreciating their own accomplishments.
It's like that comparison trap
Right.
that we can all fall into, especially in today's world.
Especially with social media.
Yeah, where we're constantly bombarded with images of other people's seemingly perfect lives.
And careers.
But the host realized that by shifting their mindset and starting to celebrate the successes of others, they actually felt happier and more fulfilled.
Wow.
It's like freeing themselves from that negative energy and allowing them to genuinely appreciate the good things happening around them.
Including their own wins.
It reminds me of that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Oh, yeah.
When we celebrate the successes of others, it creates this positive energy that benefits everyone.
Right. We all feel a little bit more inspired.
Exactly. A little bit more motivated to keep pushing forward.
And the podcast didn't shy away from the realities of workplace dynamics.
Yeah. You can't always avoid it.
They acknowledged that we'll inevitably encounter difficult people and challenging situations.
That's just part of life.
Exactly. But what I found helpful was their advice to approach these situations with grace and understanding.
Okay.
Try to see things from the other person's perspective.
Right.
And seek common ground.
Okay.
They emphasize the importance of setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Not allowing ourselves to be mistreated or disrespected.
So it's about finding that balance.
Exactly.
Between being assertive and standing up for ourselves, while also trying to maintain professionalism and respect.
Precisely. They also reminded us that sometimes the best course of action is to simply distance ourselves
Oh, yeah.
from toxic people or situations.
Sometimes you gotta walk away.
It's not about being passive or avoiding conflict,
Right.
but rather about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to challenging situations.
Okay.
We can choose to engage in a healthy way
Right.
or to remove ourselves from the situation altogether if it's not serving us.
It's about protecting our own well-being and mental health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is so crucial, especially in a demanding work environment.
And the podcast wrapped up with a powerful call to action, urging listeners to step into their workplaces with confidence and a commitment to being a shining light.
Yeah.
They reminded us that we all have unique gifts and talents that we can use to make a positive impact.
And to be bold, be authentic, and to never underestimate the power of our actions.
No matter how small they may seem.
It's a beautiful message.
It's a reminder that we all have the capacity to make a difference in the world, even in our everyday work lives.
So no matter where you are in your career journey, whether you're just starting out or you've been in the game for a while, remember that you have the power to shine bright and to make a positive impact.
That's a great takeaway. And who knew we'd find so much inspiration and practical wisdom in a faith-based podcast?
It just goes to show that valuable insights can come from the most unexpected places.
That's so true. And sometimes all it takes is a little nudge to remind us of the light we already carry within us.
It does.
So go out there and let your light shine. And